Um, then thanks for the introduction already, Marlou, on the philosophy behind the entire Economia festival. I think what you didn't mention, but what I want to dive in with you a little bit now is that for this conference, you kind of created or you organize it around 3 themes that are behind the whole festival, and that's redesigning infrastructures, shifting values, and nature's economies. And so today's session, this morning session, will be about redesigning infrastructures. The session later today will be about nature's economies. But could you please explain a little bit what Baltan means with redesigning infrastructures?
Yes, thanks for the question, Koen. When we looked at Economia, and when you talk about economy and changing it, it could feel, or at least to me and to us as a team, it felt like a very big concept, right? Like, how do you change the economy? And that made us wonder that our economy, but also our society, is built up out of several building blocks, several infrastructures. And this theme is about looking at a way to change these building blocks in order to get a bigger change on the whole economy. So it's about that sometimes we don't have to build a new system from scratch, but we could rethink its mechanisms. And then we're talking about work, health, transport, welfare, taxations, etc., etc. So this theme is about, could redesigning these building blocks trigger a bigger change on the societal level?
Okay, thanks a lot. And as we will see throughout this morning's session, I think all of the presentations are aligned with this. So I'm very curious already to find out what infrastructures we're going to redesign. Another practical thing, yesterday, in one of yesterday's sessions, we had one speaker who apparently, due to the international nature of this conference, was mistaken about the exact day that he needed to present. So, and I see that Alexis is in the audience. She asked yesterday to explain a little bit about it, but I couldn't as a moderator, but I have the good news that the yesterday's speaker, Mladen Bundalo, with his contribution entitled Disturbance in Finance and Art, has been moved to the second session today. So very glad that Baltan managed to put this on the program still for the conference. Then for this session, we will have a lineup of 5 speakers. I will introduce each of them in between, and we will have them one after the other. So the Q&A, we will organize it after all 5 presentations have taken place. If you have questions, in the meantime, you can post them in the chat window, either in the public chat or in a private message to me. And then at the end, we will walk through as much as possible of the questions. So that's it for the practicalities. And I think then I'm quite happy to move to the first speaker. The first speaker is, oh, let me switch here my screen, Ottonie von Roeder. She's a designer working in the field of critical and social design. And the project she's going to present has actually taken place in collaboration with Johan Knecht, one of the supporting partners of the Economia Festival. And when I read about her project a little bit, it made me think about the discussion that I had with someone from Singularity University about a year ago. And we were talking about automation and the potential loss of labor. What if robots take over our jobs? And one of the elements we were discussing is what would the future look like if your robot doesn't take your job, but actually goes to work for you and earns your salary. So I think this kind of very interesting thought experiments are the things that triggered me when I read about the project that Ottonie is now going to present. So it's about Isabot investing in a post-labor future. So Ottonie, I give you the microphone and the screen, and you have 10 minutes to inspire us.
Yeah, thank you, Koen, and thank you, Belton Laboratories, for, can you hear me well, everyone? Yeah. Thank you for inviting me to present the collaboration project with Belton Laboratories and Johan Knecht today. Yeah, and Koen, I think I can skip the introduction. I think Koen already described it quite well. I will now share my screen with you. Just takes a second. So today, as Koen already said, I'm going to present my collaboration project with Johan Knecht and Belton Laboratories, which is part of my currently or ongoing research project on automation and the future of labor. And as a response to current technological progress and approaching automation of all different kinds of jobs and human activities, I came up already in 2017 with a fictional civil service, which is called post-layour, which allows participants and citizens to participate in the automation of their own labor in order to explore a post-labor future. And the idea is not that we get rid of all human activities. It's more the idea to reflect on the value and notion of labor and work, and what we want to do, and actually more importantly, how we want to do it. So it's really about the conditions around labor, which turn one activity into something which is more or less enjoyable. And it's really, and this is also part of this, I think, of all different discussions during this conference, that it's about economically driven or societally driven conditions, which I believe we can free ourselves from. So in the beginning, I'm going to show you 2 quick videos which show you how this civil service is supposed to work. Yeah, I'm sorry, there's some technical... Did you hear the sound of the video? No.
We hear the video, but we don't see it. I think you have to change the screen you're sharing.
Okay, I will go. Sorry for this.
Maybe put it full screen. Now it's still on the separate slides.
Yeah, last time this worked.
Yes.
Yes, we see it.
Okay, but it's not moving. So I think I'm just going to explain to you. This is here. So it's a fictional office in which people participate in the abolition of their own labor, as I said before. And there are engineers, designers, and social scientists, psychologists that help people to go through the whole process from what they do right now until actually being liberated from their labor. So, for example, they first have discussions, and then there's an internship between a robot and the person conducting the job at this moment. And in the end, the person actually, together with the post-laboratory companions, they developed a robot which liberates them from what they did before, and then they have the freedom to actually choose how they spend their time. It's not about giving up this work or this labor completely. It's more that maybe the person can decide to work only 1 day per week, or during specific working hours, or to leave certain parts of the job to the robot. I mean, with robot, I mean automation technology in general, can also be a software, and to take over tasks that they want to do themselves. And now, and I hope this video works at least, I would like to show you one first example of such a collaboration between me and one of the first participants of the post-laboratory. Okay, can maybe I send the videos before to Loreto from Baltan Laboratories? Could you show the video for me?
If you continue the presentation, Ottonie, then I'll look for the video.
Okay.
And then,
yeah, no problem.
But is it online as well?
Yes, it's also online. I mean, it's also possible to, I can post the link afterwards in the chat and everyone can check the video afterwards online.
Yeah.
So what if a robot would do your job? So since 2017, there have been several collaborations with different participants in order to create these robots and to liberate them, but also we explored like how the notion of the office itself, like how it could be presented, how the interaction to the participants can take place. But in all these collaborations, it was always in the set of the cultural field. So it was always part of exhibitions and festivals. And usually the participants use their own free time in order to collaborate with me, which I found always a bit problematic, because the idea would be that people actually could automate their own labor within their working hours in order to not have an inequality of, inequality between different participants, but also not having anyone to invest their valuable free time. So actually, within the collaboration with Johan Knecht, it was the first time that Post-Laboratory was collaborating with a company itself about the automation of their employees and letting the employees actually participate in this discussion. And everyone was doing this within their working hours, which I found very special and good, like from a conceptual point of view. So we started to do this with visits at the company and a workshop in which we discussed like what each of the group like of the employees is at the moment doing at Johan Knecht, and how the automation of these activities could look like and what they would like to do instead if they could, if this automation would actually work out. And what I found interesting, that actually Johan Knecht is already, on one side, there are already a lot of processes automated, even by employees themselves. So they have the freedom to automate their own processes to become more efficient. And they're automating the accountancy processes of their clients. And I think, I'm not sure if this has been said before, that Johan Knecht is an auditing and accountancy firm. And and I think a lot of processes could be automated, and some of them might not be automated because of legal issues within auditing. So the most passionate employee or participant in this project was Isabella, who's also here today. I'm super happy about that. And also a lot of other staff members from Johan Knecht that I saw before. And so together with her, I'm now working on a contribution to the Economia festival and the exhibition taking place during the Dutch Design Week. So on one side, we were thinking on how her labor within Johan Knecht could be automated, but also maybe how this could trigger the automation of other people's labor. So we came up with a chatbot called Isabot, which consults clients to invest their money in order to push the automation of their own labor. So it's asking you about your profession, and then it's calculating the possibility of your profession to become automated within the near future, and checking the technology that is currently in development, and searches for the companies that actually developing this technology and does an integrity check on these companies, and then gives you an advice on where to put your money, where to invest your money in order to push the automation. So it's a bit different than the post-laboratory initially, because you're not actually developing yourself a software or a robot or any automating technology, but you're pushing automation with actually, yeah, one of the basic tools of capitalism. So thank you very much for your attention. And then I will just post the links of the videos within the chat so that at least you can see it after this.
I think Marlou can, the second movie you mentioned, Marlou can show it now, I guess.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I'll try if it works.
Thank you very much. So sadly it was without sound. So the cleaning person was, while the robot was actually cleaning the household, was telling about her post-labor life. So she was telling how she's spending her time in Morocco, traveling around and learning new things, while also by time to times cleaning, but in a different way. So I will just post the links into the chat. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ottonie. Then moving on to the next speaker. I think I'm starting to see some kind of a common thread because a few years ago, well, let's first say a few months ago, we had one of the lectures here talking about the eco coin. And a few years ago, the very first eco coin was issued here in Eindhoven. And now Diana is going to talk to us about community coins. And I read that also there, the pilot is run in Eindhoven. So there must be something about alternative currencies in Eindhoven. And I think we're very happy to hear, obviously, mostly about the community coins and not necessarily about Eindhoven. Diana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Koen. I'm happy to be here with all of you and to share our experiences with rethinking the economy and redesigning infrastructures. So let me share my screen as well. And I have no videos, so that's, I'm a bit relieved for that now. And there we go. So can you all hear me? And not sure.
Yeah, we're all good.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. So in the next 10 minutes, I will present the Community Coins project to you and our first pilot here in Eindhoven. But let me start by saying that we are living in exciting but challenging times. Challenging because of COVID-19, climate change, and political and economical dead ends. And I totally agree with you, Koen, about your remarks on Moria yesterday and the refugee crisis. Thank you for telling us about this. Yet these are also exciting times because all over the world, citizens are taking over. They set up cooperatives, they start community gardens, they trade among themselves and organize their own energy supply. Their systemic intervention is doing things differently so their communities can flourish again and overcome these challenging times of change and transition. The Community Coins project is part of this commons movement. Like other bottom-up initiatives, we are building a new economy from below, rethinking and redesigning existing frameworks, systems, and infrastructures. With Community Coins, we are rethinking the traditional dichotomy of paid work versus volunteering. What if we could create a new domain of work, somewhere in the middle? After all, as the late American anthropologist, anarchist, and activist David Graeber said, who unfortunately died last week far too young, and I quote, "The ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something we make and could just as easily make differently." So let us be that bridge to make that world differently. And let me begin with our platform and what it is all about and how we want to create positive social change. Community Coins is a digital platform, a value recognition system for volunteers. Our well-being largely depends on volunteers and citizens doing good. Yet the problem is that many people experience a lack of time or money to become active for causes they care about. They get stuck in their jobs or looking for a job, while daily costs and commitments prevent them from becoming active. So what if we could remove these barriers? And what if we could appreciate volunteers with coins that give discounts to, preferably eco-friendly and local products and services so they can reduce daily costs? We believe that in such a scheme, more people would make a positive contribution to society. And what if we could make volunteering more flexible by offering people volunteering activities instead of vacancies? People would not have to commit themselves to long-term volunteering jobs, but can integrate short-term volunteering opportunities more easily in their agendas. The next slide lists a selection of the higher effects that we aim for with our projects. There are several studies on how volunteering offers people a sense of meaning and belonging, and how volunteering creates valuable spaces for learning and developing new skills, enlarging your chances on the labor market. Thus, with Community Coins, we want to empower people to become active and make local communities more resilient. We would not have started working on this project if we would not have seen with our own eyes that it is possible. In 2015, we met a group of Greek volunteers while volunteering ourselves in the refugee crisis. The refugee crisis was not the only crisis Greeks were dealing with. Due to a devastating economic crisis, many people were jobless or sometimes even homeless. The volunteers we met were part of an inspiring community of people that organized themselves in a time bank with their own time-based currency. They did not merely exchange services with each other like Let's communities, but earned community currencies through being active. We saw with our own eyes how this system empowered them and made them more resilient in times of deep, deep crisis. Inspired by this Greek time bank, Marianne van der Linde, who is also here today, and I started designing a digital platform in 2016. The basic framework for our platform is that it connects volunteers, community organizations, and local shops in an ecosystem based on the idea that each hour of social action should be equally valued by one community coin, regardless of social backgrounds, education, or the difficulty of the job. All of that is backed by blockchain technology, recording activities and redeemed offers, making social action and economy smart, i.e. transparent and measurable. On the platform, and I'm sharing some screenshots of our platform here, you can register in 3 separate roles: as an individual volunteer, as a community organization, and as a local retailer. The coins go into a digital wallet that also shows a list of transactions. Each transaction is timestamped and recorded in the blockchain. What activities you do as a volunteer and how long exactly, all that information is stored, just like the number of coins you earned. The movement of each coin can be followed, so each coin tells the story of all social activities in which the coin is involved. This ultimately applies to the entire community, supported by local shops and companies. By the way, you can also send your coins to somebody else who needs them more than you do. We call this pay it forward. During our pilot, we first researched what motivates volunteers, traditional, modern, and potential volunteers, and why local shopkeepers would be interesting in becoming part of the network. Our pilot was also aimed at building a first community of users in a confined and controlled way, and to get much needed feedback on the UX and UI in order to make our platform as inclusive as possible. Together with our partner Fontys University of Applied Sciences here in Eindhoven, we also wanted to do impact research, but partly due to Corona, we haven't been able to grow and follow our community long enough to prove our theory of change and the higher effects that we are aiming for. Nevertheless, we are happy about the learnings and outcomes of the pilot, and we hope to join the dots soon in a follow-up pilot. During the pilot, we had several sessions with test users. We also tracked the user experiences of volunteers and organizations starting to use the platform. This resulted in a considerable wish list of improvements for the next platform that we are currently developing. Through our pilot, we also gained important insights on what community organizations need to use the platform more easily and suitable for the way they operate, and with what they can do absolutely without. We had regular meetings with community leaders of our pilot partner Stichting Ik Wil here in Eindhoven and their interns to coach them in learning to use the system and organize the onboarding of individual volunteers. This was a very challenging task, as Stichting Ik Wil is a dynamic citizen initiative. We also encountered volunteers who could not speak Dutch or were experiencing a digital gap. And some of them even didn't have an email address, so there you go. And then at the point that we were finally ready to engage local shops, unfortunately Corona brought our pilot to an ending. On the bright side, this gave us a natural break to round up the outcome of our first pilot and to set out the lines for the future. So what about that future? Well, we want to create more value besides offering discounts. What we want to do is to develop more tools to make volunteering smart. And smart, well, by smart I mean flexible, visible, transparent, and measurable. We want to help individuals to build strong and reliable social resumes, and we want to enable voluntary organizations to easily show how much impact their volunteers make. Finally, we want to give local governments the opportunity to measure social action and participation. We believe that the governance of our platform should be bottom-up. Therefore, we're exploring ways to create a platform cooperative in which the data is actually owned by its users. There's much more to tell, but my 10 minutes are up. So it would be great to hear your thoughts about our project and perhaps also suggestions on how to make it sustainable at the end of this session. In the meanwhile, let me share my contact details and invite you to contact us if you want to know more about our project or if you want to explore possible collaborations. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Diana. And already tackling the suggestion or question in the chat, is there also a link to the Community Coins platform itself that you can share with us?
Yes, I can share it with you.
Yeah.
But it's I'm afraid it's fairly empty now because of Corona. We stopped putting volunteer activities on it, and we're developing the new one. But you can have a look. Of course.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Okay, the next speaker is going to talk about another infrastructure in our economic system, which is your income. And it made me think of an installation that was featured by Baltan Laboratories in the first edition of the Economia Festival, which was an artistic installation called the Minimal Wage Machine. And there this was, let's say, a glass box filled with euro cents, with small coins. And there was a lever that you had to turn. And it gave you money at the rate that people would normally have to work to earn a minimal wage, which meant that you could keep the money, but which meant that you had to turn for, I'm not sure anymore, but I think 15 minutes or more before you could earn enough euro cents to go to the bar and pay for your own beer. Now the next speaker, who is Martina Huynh, if I pronounce that correctly, she's going to talk about basic income cafe. So I'm very curious to hear about that. The screen is all yours.
Thank you. Is the sound okay?
Yeah.
Do you hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Perfect.
Okay, that's good. All right, so I'm sharing my screen now. All right. Okay, thanks for having me. I'm just going to start right with a video. So in this video, you see a woman handing out bills of 10 Swiss francs, just like that at the Zurich train station. So, I mean, that's lovely, but what are they campaigning for? Now, in 2016, in Switzerland, where I'm from, there was an unprecedented referendum on whether the country should introduce a universal basic income or not. Should every Swiss citizen be guaranteed 1,000 to 1,500 euros every month unconditionally? So no papers to fill out, no job applications that you have to do, no proof of unemployment or even financial checkups. What if everyone in Switzerland, even the richest, and we're talking about Switzerland, what if everyone would be granted this amount of money just because it would be seen as a basic right? What if instead of securing a job for everyone to make a living, we would secure income for everyone instead? Now, so even though this proposal was eventually rejected, for me, it was still really inspiring to see amidst all the things we saw in the news 2016, there was a positive alternative. There was a constructive approach. And so on this banner, you see, what would you do if your income were taken care of? And so what was really interesting was that it sparked this nationwide debate about fundamental questions on how do we want to work? How has the work landscape shifted? How do we relate to it? And how do work and income stand next to each other? Or how do we want to live together? Like, who do we trust with this money? And so during the same time, I was following up on what else was being discussed on basic income. So for instance, Silicon Valley was quite interested in the idea of basic income for the loss of jobs that they help create and automate. In Finland, there was a national pilot running for 2 years. And even Italy's 5-star movement was talking about basic income, even though it actually looked much more like unemployment benefits. And so it wasn't hard to see that all of these places had very different interpretations of what a basic income economy could look like. And under what conditions they should, money should be handed out. So there were all these different versions. And so at this point, I was wondering, I mean, maybe the discussion should not be centered around should any country introduce a basic income or not, but what kind of basic income are we talking about? What kind of economy based on which values should a system be introduced? So with the background of being a designer, I set up Basic Income Cafe. It's very simple. It's a space where the flow of coffee is used as a metaphor for the flow of money, to visualize the flow of money. So how does it work? Upon entering the cafe, you receive 1 cup of coffee for free. That's your basic income, so to say. So it should be like this cup of coffee that gives you just enough energy to kickstart your day. What happens if you want to drink more than a cup of coffee? Because only the first one is for free. Well, then you have to go to work. You have to go to the workstation. You go manually grind coffee beans in order to brew more coffee. And that extra coffee, so a part of that is your salary that goes into your cup. But a part of it, you see this other tube going into another vessel, that's your income tax. So a part of that flows off back into this central BLT sculpture from which people get their basic income. So you can actually drink as much coffee as you want. Just you have to work for it. And the benefit of that is that every time you do work, you are literally contributing to the local economy, because fresh coffee flows back as income tax into the system. So other people get the basic income as well. So a cup of coffee. So that's all nice. And so this system was loosely modeled on the discussions I was following in Switzerland. So what if you get enough money that you don't necessarily have to work, so your basics are covered? And what would happen then? So would people then work for something else or work on something else? And then maybe it opens up the definition of work, because the work you do is not necessarily tied to being financially compensated. So it's not like the work you do is only defined by that you get money for it, but it kind of reverses the principle. So you first get money, then you do something with it, with this energy. The other side is slightly different. So you get only half a cup of coffee. It's a bit, but it's still for free. You didn't have to show me how thirsty or in need of coffee you are. You get this cup of coffee. It's just enough energy for you to go to work, go find work, so to say, in order to make yourself a full cup of coffee. So this, which means there's a clear work incentive. You don't get a full cup. You have to work still a little bit at least. So this side is loosely modeled on the discussions and the national pilot in Finland, where 2,000 unemployed Finns were given half the amount of what would be a basic income to live from, but it's there to help them find a job and to push them to find more security in that. So you see two very different intentions in these two sides. The goal of this installation is to make this whole topic of values in economy and systems more accessible. So it's important that not only people from the economic or political sector feel entitled to discuss fundamental questions, economic questions, but people from all walks of life. We want to hear their opinions on what they consider a fair economy, or how they see the relation between work and income. So that's why we opened as a pop-up cafe for 3 months in The Hague. So a cafe on street level where we just try to lure people in with free coffee to talk to us about their definition of work. And so the space was there to host the semi-structured interviews, so we could ask people what they think about this topic, but make it really accessible, just as in like, you can literally see the text flow, you can point at stuff, drink coffee. It's a very casual setup. And so we found that, so just to give you a very quick summary of some of the findings from the interviews. So most people that indicated that they like the work they do, they said it's because they feel they're contributing something to society, and that made us ask, okay, what do you think? So that's a team of researchers. What do you think is a useful contribution? So what is meaningful work? A 30-year-old man said, well, that's somebody who is productive to others. That could mean that, for instance, a mother is also of value because she is productive to her child. So in a way, it's not so surprising that quite a lot of answers that we got from what do you think is a meaningful contribution of society ranked high in terms of like, it was mostly jobs in the health and care sector, alongside education, parenting, the legal system, ensuring everyone's rights, all of which could be considered forms of care or taking responsibility for someone else on varying scales. So next, our team was asking, why do we work? Why do we work for others? So a migration researcher, she said, well, in principle, to make the organization of society run as smoothly as possible. Now, if we take that as the definition of meaning of work for now, like in the frame of this small study, it's easy to understand why almost all participants would say that everybody who is able to should make a contribution. So that ties a bit to what are the conditions if someone were given a basic income or any kind of financial support. So, for instance, this woman said, I think everyone can do something, even if it's just cooking for a sick neighbor. And if you would define that as work as well, everyone would earn their money. So that kind of reflects most of the interviewers' opinions on whether someone should be doing, whether most people should be doing something, which is still quite general. So we continue at asking, why do you think some jobs are paid more than others? Why is that? And do you think that's fair? So just to give you 2 quotes. So someone was saying, for me, the criteria is the responsibility that someone bears for a large team, for people's lives, for important matters. People with great responsibilities who are still worrying about the well-being of others when they return home. Someone who can close their computer at 5 p.m. and not worry about anything anymore doesn't have to earn that much. A different opinion, and a slightly different thing. Someone who started working with 16 has 9 years more income than someone who studied until 25 and has to pay off their student debt afterwards. The latter deserves to earn well, even though it's behind the desk and physically not that demanding. So that's just some of the quotes we got in this regard. To round up, and I have this feeling I've been talking really fast, but yeah, I hope it was okay. So I want to show you this last quote. So, when do you think someone is of value to society? Ties to one of the previous questions. So what do you think of a high frequency trader on Wall Street? Is he or she value to society? Yes, for a society with a capitalist economy. But you can ask yourself to what extent this system is of value. And that kind of sums up what we've been trying to do is, also seeing that the jobs that are most socially valued are not really financially compensated adequately. And we see the economic value of people we spoke to does not really align with the values of the current system, where the market sets prices according to supply and demand. And sadly, some forms of work that are abundant and many people can do them, like parenting, volunteering, social assistance, is valued less because of this logic. And so this is just a beginning, but very curious to see how using kind of design skills in creating spaces or like little metaphors or inspiring little stimulations to help people talk about such fundamental economic questions could help us get a clearer picture of what are desirable values to base an economy on. And similar to all these different understandings of how a basic income could work, I guess that definition of a desirable economy and the values in it will differ from place to place. So, okay, that's it. So I hope that wasn't too fast. Well, I'm stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And for me, it wasn't too fast at all. I think it was a very, very clear, comprehensive story. And great to see that and I don't have to convince you that indeed an artistic installation is able to start and feed a discussion on a much more fundamental level than any whatever policy instrument or intervention could ever do. So thanks again for sharing that. So then moving on to the next speakers. There's 3 of them. I'm not sure how they're going to divide the roles, but we'll find out soon. This is Alessandro Ghio, Nick McGuigan, and Lisa Powell. They're all here nicely with a uniform background, so easy to recognize. Thanks for that. If there's one thing that I noticed in the abstract that they send in is that they definitely use or introduce a different vocabulary in the world of economy and accounting that what I'm used to seeing. Normally it's about compound accumulated growth rates and equity and all this kind of stuff. And I don't think any of these words will be in their presentation. So I'm very interested to hear how they're going to tell us how we can queer the spreadsheet. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I think Nick will share the screen and then we are going to have the presentation. So thank you very much. Yes, we will have a very different approach to accounting in this presentation, which is how do you query the spreadsheet, which is a joint work between myself, Alessandro, Nick, and Lisa. We are all here from Australia, even though I like to start the presentation with the welcome to country and beginning to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the many stolen lands and nations we are presenting from today, Lisa, Nick, and I. We pay our respects to the elders of the past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge their spiritual connection to country. So this presentation perfectly fits with the theme of this session about redesigning the structure. And accounting is typically a very strong structure which pervades our society. So usually accounting, as we see in the next slide, is portrayed as something that perpetuates certain systems and certain structures, in particular calculations, numbers. And this is usually performed by what we usually call a white straight male, the typical accountant. So you think, if you Google accountant, if you think what an accountant is, well, very often this is the picture that you can see. And why is this important? And this is at the core of our manifesto of querying accounting. This is important because who holds the power, the so-called white straight male, the white male pale, as some people define, perpetuates a certain type of heteropatriarchal capitalistic view. So accounting, as we know now, it's strongly embedded in a neoliberal economy, which perpetuates one single view. And our idea is that we want to disrupt this. Also because these ideas on which accounting is grounded and which all the current economy, capitalist economy, is based on, it's an opposition to gender and sexuality because they require fixed norms, binarism, and all those characteristics which are very, what in a Foucault way, opposite to gender and sexuality. So starting from this, we are trying to disrupt this, and so we have started joint work with us as academics, accountants, and artists. So we've partnered with a Sydney artist group Frontyard, and we did a recipe where we run a workshop with artists trying to queer the spreadsheet. And so our idea was, how do we disrupt accounting through queer voices? So this is a big idea. So we try to disrupt the neoliberal heteropatriarchal capitalist view by embracing queer views. And obviously, as you may have noticed, a lot of our statements will come from queer theory, which means disrupting the norm. And I pass now to my fellow colleague, Lisa.
Thanks, Ali, and hi, everybody. So I'm just going to talk briefly about what the manifesto is. And just to do that, we're going to play a video. And the video is introducing the manifesto by Karen from Finance, who is a corporate queen from Melbourne.
Oh, hi there. To all my gorgeous queer accountants and our fabulous allies, welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Karen from Finance. I'm a purveyor of fine spreadsheets, a post-it note enthusiast, and all in all, your friendly corporate queen. Are you sick of archiving invoices, completing tax forms, deflecting Roger the CEO's misogynistic passes? Have you ever dreamt of overthrowing the patriarchy and taking over the world? I know I have. What would accounting look like if it were queered? If the pale, stale male image was replaced by colour, diversity, and fabulousness? My good friends at Monash University, the queering accounting team, have been working damn hard to make that change. And I couldn't be more excited to share with you their brand new Queering Accounting Manifesto. To say that something is normal is wrong. Envision a future of accountants beyond existing norms. Expose accounting norms for what they are, an illusion of normality. Accountants must open space for all voices. Break down the hierarchies of gender, sex, race, and class that pervade accounting. Let's create a brave space that allows all accountants to be themselves. Fluidity must be embraced, and false binaries rejected. Reject accountants' linear thinking and processes, their abstract binaries, and their rigid normalizing categories. We want accountants open to multiple ways of thinking and doing and being. Queer unlearning. Let's unlearn what it means to be normal and natural. Let's open up accounting working environments to experimentation, creativity, and innovation. A single view of accounting is rejected. Embrace multiple narratives where accountants are interpreters of reality. Imbue the decision-making process with emotion. Accountants must hold spaces. Embracing all voices requires an opening up and a connection through safe and open dialogue and mutual appreciation. This queer manifesto should be continuously queered. This manifesto is fluid. We encourage and expect people to engage, to criticize, to politicize, to activize, to perform, to love, and to enjoy the Queering Accounting Manifesto. So I'm calling all you queer accountants and your beautiful allies. Queering accounting needs you, and we need you now. Remember, think queerly, act up, and act out. Bye now.
So I'll just talk briefly now about how we've created the manifesto. So as Ellie said, we've written the manifesto to overcome heteronormativity, patriarchy within accounting. So accounting being a very traditional conservative space. So I'll just briefly talk about some of the propositions that we've written. So accountants opening space for all voices. This is really important because within accounting, we know it's very hierarchical. We have a mono view, a monoculture. So what we're trying to do here is to break through that hierarchy to make space for all voices, for diverse perspectives. And this is in a very traditional conservative environment. So creating space for all accountants to be free to be themselves. We embrace fluidity and reject false binaries. So we know that we have the false binaries of gender and sexuality, and we reject those false binaries. And likewise with accounting, we know it's a social construct and it's built on very linear thinking and false binaries and very rigid categories. So we want to break through those categories to embrace a more fluid process. So opening up accounting to multiple ways of thinking about accounting, multiple ways of doing accounting, and multiple ways of being in accounting. We know that we need a greater complexity within accounting to be appropriate for what we have in the natural environment. We reject a single view of accounting. So within accounting, it's based on a single conceptual framework, which is not appropriate. We need to think about adding in complexity, and to do that, we're creating space for more diverse voices and diverse perspectives. So holding spaces open for where diverse perspectives can come together and communicate fiercely. And last thing is we want to have the manifesto to be continuously queered. So we're going to create a Queering Accounting Manifesto wiki where people can continuously engage with the manifesto and to continuously queer the manifesto. So I'll just pass over now to Nick for the next part of the presentation.
Great, thanks, Lisa. We understand the problematizing of a queer voice, and so in working on the manifesto and collaborating with others, we've listened to multiple and diverse queer voices across our entire community. However, we equally understand that we are unable to speak for the experiences of many queer people, for example, non-Western lesbian accountants, white gay partners who are on the down low at work, transsexual Black accountants working in accounting firms. Through a reflexive awareness and active articulation of our own contexts via visibilization that makes the white Western middle class variables explicit and not left unsaid or unrecognized, we acknowledge our own location and we aim to evoke a turning toward the other. a constant queering of voice, the voices and ideas uttered within the Queering Accounting Manifesto, therefore involve a relentless troubling and questioning both by ourselves and also collectively by others. And when that queer voice hits power, this is a practical example of what that might kind of result in. So this was earlier this year, pre-COVID. This was in London. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen, this is the institution, the IASB. So we went to the space in London, we went into that space and we started to take photographs, which apparently is illegal. And so you can see in the middle of that screen, these are police officers that this private company of Canary Wharf hire from the public police force to secure and control that area. And that's me having a polite conversation which started to escalate, etc., when they could see what was on the manifesto, which is illustrated by the last example of the picture there, when my partner is taking photographs literally from the hip, trying not to get caught because what we were doing was not really appropriate, I guess. So it was quite a confrontational situation. You can't see this, but there were 3 other police officers behind me. I was a little bit concerned being a tourist in London, trying to do things for my students. However, the next slide illustrates the clear differentiation between spaces. So this is a queer space. It's Bishopgate Institute, which is the British lesbian and gay LGBT archives in Britain. And so we found this particular archive, we took images of the archive, and then we were able to hand over the manifesto physically to the British archives. So those poster images that were sort of so confrontational apparently to our accounting structures and power were then placed into a really nice, warm, welcoming space within the same city. So thank you so much for our ability to share the presentation with you. Here's our Instagram account and also our website. If anybody's interested, we curate queer images of accounting and create queer stories through our Instagram account. We'd love to connect with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for sharing this colorful presentation with us. So now we've had all 5 very interesting, inspiring talks, so we can move on to the Q&A. And let me first try to walk through the questions that have been posted in the chat window. And I think the first one, and we will have to refresh our minds a little bit, is a question to Ottonie from Kimberly. Who are the we that you mentioned that will have the opportunity to be liberated? I'm sorry, is this question sufficiently clear to you, Ottonie, or does...
Yes. Yeah, I can just answer. With we, I mean everyone. So of course, this is very speculative because we will not be able, in our current system, we will not be able that each of us is actually working on the automation of their own labor and can be supported with this. But I left it in this speculative way in order to trigger discussion. And this, could I also answer on something that Joseph said in his talk, or should I?
Sure, no, go ahead.
Because it's a bit related. I think Joseph was mentioning that it shouldn't be the aim to have people behind the machines, like a cleaning person sitting behind a cleaning machine. So the aim of my project is not that people are still sitting behind any machines and clicking buttons, but it's actually to include them into the technological progress of developing these machines, but then to actually be free and not sitting behind the machines. So just to make that clear. I wasn't sure if it's clear or not.
Yeah, I think I understand that was the goal of your project, but I think my take was more a realistic take. Yeah, just when you look at the people around you and their jobs. So
yeah, I think that's the current situation.
That's the current situation
that you described. Yeah, very well.
Okay, I'm not sure. I see that Kimberly, or should I say Kimberly Bianca, she's still in the room. Does that answer your question? I'm just assuming yes. Okay.
Okay, otherwise just type again in the chat.
Yeah. So moving on to the next question was from Diana for Joseph. And maybe Diana, you can just pose your question live so that we don't have to read it out loud. You would have to unmute yourself.
I was trying to do it with my spacebar, but it's not working. Yeah, Joseph, I really liked your idea. I think time could be a great equalizer, right? Because we all have 24 hours in a day. So it would, you know, it would be an opportunity to end inequality, to redefine work as investing time instead of earning money. But then I think my question is related to the question to Ottonie, because who is the we and who is the them, you know, the model, for who will it work? And if you would present your model to the working classes, I mean, people who sit behind counters now in supermarkets, maybe not have an education, how would they think about investing their time in relation to the future? And how would this, well, this is a big line, but liberate the classes?
I think
I'm sure you have thought about this. So.
Yes, I mean, it's a very big question, of course. And I mean, I would say, of course, this is a question of, are you the master of your time, right? So I am also working in a bullshit job, which I cannot leave because I have to pay my rent, right? So, I mean, I think this is a question which I think I wish I could solve now, but I also cannot solve. But I just feel really what I'm talking about, it's really a kind of change in thinking, let's say, because I think you can really, because we are educated really by in this way that, okay, you must earn money, you should earn more money, like you are comparing yourself with other people who is earning more, who is earning less. So I'm more talking about a kind of mind shift away from this. So I think in a way, each of us, even if you are a policeman, if you are a nurse, of course, for someone it is easier to work from the Starbucks than from someone else. Yeah, and I think this one, it cannot be solved with what I'm saying. But I would also say I am not really proposing any solutions. I am really posing questions. I'm an artist.
Yeah, you're allowed. We need those questions. So thank you. But I, as a person who wears her heart on the left side double, I'm double left, and I'm left-handed as well, I needed to pose that question.
Okay, great. And I think Ottonie still also wants to add something to that. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you very much for your question, Diana, and your reply, Joseph. I think I agree with both of you. And I think, and I also, that would be also a reply to Martina's talk about the universal basic income. I think all these ideas in itself are very intriguing, but I think just isolated, they wouldn't work. Because, I mean, we still are situated in a certain system that works how it works. I mean, we all know it. And I think it just takes like a very high step, like culturally, not only economically, and politically, but also from a culture point of view, to actually get over this and to actually unlearn labor, to unlearn income, to unlearn capitalism. So that's why I initially came up with this civic service, but I think you could find like other methods, but I think we really have to bring like all these ideas together and work on different levels, like not only working on an economical side, so only working on the aspect of income. I think it triggers a lot, but I think we also have to work on the cultural point of view and on the personal psychologically. So as Diana said, like if you would ask like anyone who never thought of a universal basic income or who thought of how to use their time as an investment, they wouldn't have an answer. I think, I don't know if Joseph, if you actually meant that, but there's one example from a philosopher from the 1950s who, when in Michigan, the car industry, so his name is Fritjof Bergman. I don't know if you meant him when you were talking about half a year at the beach. But when in the 50s, like the car industry in Michigan was about to automate 50% of the jobs, he came up and suggested a proposal, which he called 50-50 proposal, I think. And he suggested the workers that he suggested this to the companies and the workers, that the workers would spend half a year free and half a year they would work. So they would actually split the work. And what was interesting to me, that it was not the companies refusing this, which you would initially think, but it was actually the workers refusing. Mm-hmm. And their argument was that they didn't know what to do with their new, like, freely gained time. So he described this as a societal ill, a poverty of desire. And yeah, I think this is really describing quite a lot about how labor is so embedded into not only our economical system, but also our social and personal structures.
I think this is a really good point, and I totally agree, because I really think it's a kind of change of mindset before changing of anything else.
Yeah, and I think all these ideas like a universal basic income or using your time as an investment is one tool, but I think by itself it wouldn't work.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. And indeed, Joseph, I think the last thing you have to do is apologize for not having the answers to everything, because let me remind everyone to also a quote that I made yesterday from one of the keynote speakers, Godelieve Spaas, who said, the aim is not to come to an absolute statement, it is to give tools to get a complete picture. So I think this is a brilliant quote that I wanted to remind everyone of, also who is here with us today. Then moving on to two questions.
Can I add to that, Koen?
Yeah, Diana.
That's all of us who are living now in the Republic of Juppie, that we respect the paradox.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
I subscribe their constitution. Yeah.
Great. So then moving on to Alessandro and Nick and Lisa talk. I think first of all, I'm going to take the last question first, because that's zooming in, and then the second to last question is zooming out. So let's first zoom in a little bit. And I think the question is about, can we dive a little bit more into the processes and implementation of your ideas? And I think one of the suggestions that I want to make, at least to the people of Johan Knecht who are joining this session, is that maybe your movie, if you're willing to share it with them, maybe they can just screen it as an opening movie of the next Johan Knecht board meeting, for example. So I think that could already be a very good first step of implementing it into daily processes of accountants. But could you elaborate a little bit more on your ideas about actual implementation deep into the firms?
Yeah, thanks also for inviting the movie start. Yeah, so thanks for your question, Martina, about the implementation. And clearly what we want to disrupt is this binary linear process. So also the idea of how we reimagine accounting is from a much more holistic view and much more humanistic, so putting again the human at the center. In practical terms, you may say, well, if you have some familiarity with accounting, you always say this debits and credits, everything balancing, inflow, outflow. But the focus is always only on financial capital. A lot of this we could go beyond by looking at, for instance, narrative. So there is a lot of people now working on so-called dialogic accounting. So how can we dialogue and interact with different people, stakeholders? And so going beyond the number, beyond the binarism, by introducing narrative, by introducing dialogue. And also the second point I want to make is also about going beyond the capitals, primarily financial capital, but more broadly the capitals, and trying to introduce more human aspects, like trying to understand what's the role of emotions, for instance, in organizations. Why do we need to only account for employees like cost, which is the only things that in accounting we have, salaries, it's the cost we put in the income statement. And why don't we take in consideration their value, but also their emotions in organizations? And all of this, accounting can play a role, not only by quantifying in numbers, but also in introducing narratives. So the idea would be introducing narrative, putting the human and the emotions again at the center.
Actually, Ottonie, thanks a lot. And I just sent a private message also in the chat to Trudy asking, would you maybe be willing to comment or reply? But since she doesn't have her video on, I'm not even sure if she's fully with us, but let's see. I would also be very interested to hear their reaction, because from my knowledge of their company, I think these are exactly also the topics that resonate already internally with them, like making accountancy more human and putting the human more in the center. So maybe someone, if maybe I hear that also Oscar is here from Johan Knecht, maybe he can reply.
So I can give a little response to your reaction. First of all, thank you for all the inspiring talks. I didn't realize that our business of accounting and assurance is so inspiring for the future. Normally accountancy is a bit of conservative, and as I see by the robotics, by the paradigm shifts of the way of doing accounting, I think we are in an era in which accountancy will be a much inspiring world, which might actually reflect the way of working for the future. So the ideas I've heard, I certainly will make it to our board meeting, also the videos, and I think I will inspire my colleagues also to think about how we should do the business for the future. That's not the normal way. It's a new way, by accounting in a digital way, in other ways of working with people, and perhaps for the future we can see what actually has been realized of all the ideas I've heard from today. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, Oscar, but I think knowing quite a bit of accountancy companies myself, I think it's safe to say that Johan Knecht is amongst the one that have these, let's say, more progressive or future-oriented insights very high on the agenda, right? Trying to redefine yourself and your profession.
Yes, that's correct. We are quite known for our digital ideas. However, it's difficult to realize them in practice, but to the outside world, we are one of the leaders trying to change the world in a digital way to inspire, of course, our customers, our workers, but also the way we can be responsible in social developments, especially in the Brainport area. That's correct.
Yeah, thank you. And then maybe a good bridge to zoom out a little bit, and I'm gonna squeeze in one of the questions that I had to then maybe merge it with the question that was posted through the Baltan account. My question would have been, why did you specifically target the accountancy domain? Because I think there's a lot of other domains that have similar, where you could project similar observations onto. And then I think moving even one level higher, what if you would maybe take trust as a common denominator or a generic element, maybe on the higher level, that you could also target with your manifesto and approach?
Can I respond to that, if that's okay? Why we targeted accounting? One, it was one of the world's most conservative professions. It's there and designed with that mind on purpose, and I'll talk a bit about that in a second. So one, it was conservative. Two, it's one of the most powerful professions in the world. It dominates to the point where it's become part of our everyday life. Cost-benefit analysis is all of the accounting kind of mentality, where we break our decisions into this binary way of operating. And so we really wanted to overthrow that power by querying accounting, because the idea of one national accounting standard to rule them all, like the Lord of the Rings, is very concerning for our world and future. We need much more diversity, we think, in that profession. And that means we have to take on power, and we can do that in a really playful way by working with artists, probably, to vision that kind of more diverse future. So we kind of use play and art as a way to kind of soften the power structures. So I wouldn't be talking to all accounting professions or professional bodies, which is where we work mostly with, the way here. But the second point is honing in on the idea of trust. We have designed a profession to be conservative so that you trust us. It's what we sell as accountants. We sell trust, literally. If we break that form of trust, then you won't buy our services or products. And so very powerfully, if we were able to queer trust, that would be really useful. And part of that is actually to put our trust back into humans and not into financial transactions. So maybe the world of accounting will shift itself into more of accounting for interactions and a balance between ecology, sociology, and this idea of economic mindset, so that we as accountants become a balancing kind of role rather than focusing on financial transactions. The world doesn't need money, it's the social construction. If we get rid of that, all the other capitals, if you look at accounting and the way we account, all the other capitals are physical and part of the real world.
Okay, thanks a lot. And now that you mentioned indeed the word trust and redefining trust, I think makes me, I'm not sure if every one of you has already seen one of the lectures from the festival from Gijs de Boer on redefining trust, and I think also that would be very interesting. So I encourage everyone to go to the Economia YouTube channel and also watch that lecture related to that. And then another thing you were mentioning was dominant powers. And I think maybe this could be a nice bridge to also some of the questions that I had for, I think, almost all of the speakers, if we can still find the time for that. But I think it's no secret that one of the dominant powers today is obviously the COVID-19 pandemic that that rules the world at this moment. And I couldn't avoid seeing a potential influence of the current times on a number of the presentations that have been given. So maybe first of all, I'm just going to do it chronologically and start with Ottonie. You mentioned that part of your process was to design a fictional office. And now with COVID-19, all that I see is, I think, an office has become a fictional concept after all. So do you see any positive, negative, any relationship there between how people now perceive their offices and their work and what you've previously encountered in your project?
I think more, I mean, that's one issue, of course, like the remote work and home office. But I think what is more important for me is actually that automation itself is pushed much quicker now, as people are sent into, I don't know how you call it in English. In Germany, it's called Kurzarbeit, where you are still hired, but you're not working or just working parts of your hours and paid by the government. And the question is actually if these people are if all the people are going to be hired back, or if it's actually more economic from an economical point of view. For most of the companies, actually now is the time to invest their money into new technologies. That's at least what is said, like in forecasts also, that this is like might be a push in digitalization. So for me, it actually makes this topic of automation and how the future of labor and work might look like just more important. And I think it's just speeding it up. Okay,
great, thanks. And then a similar question, and I think to both Diana and Martina, I think an important part of your contributions had to do with people helping each other out and the value of well, being productive to others. I have the perception that amidst all the misery that COVID-19 is bringing us, that also in a way it has brought back the appreciation for helping each other out, both on the individual and community level, but also on a corporate level in a way. Do you think that this could have a positive effect, or do you observe that this has a positive effect on the the communities you're working with, the people you're talking to, that there's a shift in mindset maybe? Maybe Diana, you can answer first.
Well, besides the communities and the mind shift, I think the mind shift was already there, that people are aware how important it is to help each other and to develop new skills and, you know, be part of something. And I think what COVID learns us is who are we? It's like the basic units are redefined. Are you part of a family or are you single? Do you live in a street where you have to wear masks or not? How can you participate in the public space during the pandemic? But I think for us, more importantly, besides the volunteering, because I think our community members were already convinced that volunteering is important and to become socially active, is actually the realization that in the global economy, the chains are too long, right? If you have to fly certain products from Chile or Southern Africa, oranges, for example, while we grow them in Spain as well here in Europe, people become more aware. And during the pandemic, of course, planes couldn't fly. So a lot of change got broken. And what I see around us is that people are so much aware that the future is actually local, and that we have to reconnect locally and, you know, consume from shorter supplies, supports, like local farms, local organizations. And this is a great opportunity. This is a great reaffirmation for us, for our foundation, who's working on other ways of living together, working and consuming, because we think it's all interconnected. And I think what's happening during this pandemic is like it's a proof of our theory of change, that we need to change that world. Yeah? So let's have a global revolution, so local, but throughout the world, and make through connections with each other and also with our local shops. So the Buy Local campaigns are big in Eindhoven now. I'm really happy to see it, and I can't wait to have a follow-up pilot and kick some ass with that. Yeah, find each other.
Yeah, thank you. And then Martina, obviously, in your presentation, you already mentioned that this notion of universal basic income is back high on the agenda thanks to COVID, but maybe on a more micro level. Do you see in your surroundings, in your network, do you see that people maybe have a different attitude towards your project now, that there's a mind shift there on the micro scale in the people you're immediately interacting with?
About my project, I think while there has been a bit more interest talking about the topic of basic income, but other than that, I think maybe what I think is interesting is that I mean, a lot of people have to work from home or are like put on working just only a few hours with some governmental support maybe. And it kind of brings a little bit about this shift that Ottonie and Joseph were talking about before, that or this question of what would you do if your income were taken care of? And so it's like kind of throwing people into the situation. So kind of still having to work, but then also maybe maybe actually getting the financial support, and then what do you do with your time? And also, if you, for 3 months, maybe don't define yourself so much by your identity through the work that you do, then what else do you define yourself from? And I think it's pushing people a little bit into these waters, which is quite interesting, because it's true. It's much about the mindset of how we relate to work as a source of income, but also status and identity. And I remember that from one of the interviews I had very early on with a philosopher on basic income, he said that if we were to introduce basic income just like next week, probably not too much would happen, because we have the same attitudes towards work and income and economy. So I think with the situation, it's like, getting a little taste of what that could be and how people would find themselves in this situation.
Thank you. And then immediately brings me with Joseph. Obviously, do you agree that or do you see that we're going through this mind shift? Because at least personally and in my surroundings, and I have a lot of hardcore capitalist friends in my network who now suddenly start texting me like, oh, it's incredible now that I have so much time. Look how good my children are listening to me when I spend time with this kind of stuff. Aren't it now, let's say, isn't it time heaven for you now and for your type of projects and ideas?
I agree. I really think, of course, like this new situation was a kind of shock. I think, as Martina was mentioning, that just, you know, like people suddenly, and even I felt it, like, okay, suddenly you have time, or, I mean, I have people around me which are still in this situation, right? They are getting paid, but you actually don't have to work. So I think it is a kind of shock situation. And I mean, I would personally wish that, okay, how can we keep this momentum and how can we kind of keep going on like this, right? How can we kind of protect, because I also observed that, like, of course, the companies are kind of moving toward, okay, we have to return to the normal situation as soon as possible. And even, of course, the people have this attitude because, as mentioned, I mean, people define themselves through really what they are doing, or they miss their colleagues and so on. So I think it's I think this was really a kind of, if we can take something positive from this virus epidemic, so I think this was really the positive thing, that it kind of shifted things. It created a kind of momentary chaos, and I think it's a really kind of situation which I hope I mean, when about all these things we are talking about now, it is a kind of change which I think it could help to push us things in the right way.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm also looking at time, but going through the list, maybe also one of the three last speakers, do you see any crucial change or something linked to the current times we live in that has an influence on your project?
I think with accounting, it really represents an opportunity for change. Accounting is so focused, like Ellie said, so focused on the financial aspects and really ignores the natural world. So I think, and there's a mindset that there is, you know, increasing technology will solve the issue. But we need to take a step back from that and think about our relationships with each other, our relationships with the natural world and with other species, and think about not just accountability from the financial point of view, but accountability from the point of view of humanity and other species and the natural world. So if we can do that and take a step back from that, I think we have the opportunity in accounting to really make transformational change. So I think that's an opportunity to do that.
Okay, thanks a lot. And I think couldn't have found a better statement to wrap up this first session, because when we get back, and that will be in 40 minutes from now, so here in the Netherlands will be 12:30. I'm not sure what time it will be with you, and I think this could be a very nice experiment just to wrap up this session, that everyone just types in the public chat the time they have it now, because I hear we have people from Australia, this is really an international audience. So just I'm very curious to see all times popping up. And yesterday we had someone at 5:30 in the morning. So I really appreciate the motivation for people joining this session. So, and also related to your statement, Lisa, the session at 12:30 will be all about nature's economies. So perfect illustration that this conference and this festival is not just about the economy, but about society and our planet as a whole, if you want. So I want to thank everyone for having joined us, for the interesting presentations, the interesting conversations, and I hope to see a lot of you again at, well, for us 12:30, so in 40 minutes from now. A practical thing, here at Balta Laboratories, we will switch off the video and mute our microphones, but the chat room will stay open. So if you want to have an informal chat with each other or whatever, you can still engage. So we'll leave the chat room open, and we'll join you again in 40 minutes. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.